Let's talk about where to find freedom in an unfree world, because I think a lot of people who watch this live in a country like the United States or Canada or Australia, and they kind of go back and forth. One of the things that I've found over the years is really helpful is having mental clarity about what I think about my country and what my expectations are. This should be applied to any relationship. What are my expectations of my employee, my employer, my friendship, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my spouse, my parent? What are my boundaries and what do I not accept? I think setting really healthy boundaries is important, and I want to talk about how you can do that and how you can find more personal freedom getting out of a country where you're probably living right now that's not nearly as highly ranked as you think in terms of personal freedom, especially in the US where a lot of people are telling us, hey, I don't feel as free. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally reduce their taxes, diversify and protect their assets, get multiple citizenship, and build their freedom so that they can live in, do business in, and have access to countries that respect the things that they find important and that is freedom to them. We also host the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live, open to absolutely everybody. And we're going to be talking about some of this stuff this year, so you might want to join us. Let me talk to you about a Fox News clip I saw that someone shared with me, where basically it's July 4th, which, you know, from where I'm from, is a day where people who have deep concerns about their country, who see the fact that there were 309 mass shootings the first half of the year, who see the fact that education is worse than ever, who think there's a lot of concerns, all get together and say, we're the biggest and best. This is number one. If you don't like it, get out. And there's a lot of, every July 4th, if you don't like it, leave. And, you know, a couple years ago, I engaged with Patrick Bet-David, who we had on the show, super nice guy. And he was like, hey, if you don't like it here, get out. Now, he's always talking to people who, I don't like capitalism. I think this country is terrible. And he says, oh, that's not you. But for me, I didn't like it, and I did leave. And what did people do? They said the same nasty things they did before I left. Like, if you don't like it, leave. Okay, hey, cool, right? Like, if you're in a relationship with somebody and, you know, they're like, listen, this is how I operate. I like to eat and leave crumbs in the bed, or, you know, I like to, you know, wake up at 11 a.m., or like, I like to, you know, dance in the kitchen, whatever they like. Like, if you don't like it, leave. And you're like, okay, sure, like, let's end the relationship. I don't want to have that in my relationship. The healthy response isn't, well, then screw you. It's like, oh, okay, hey, listen, we're not a fit, and that's cool. I think that, like, there's more need for we're not a fit in relationships, including with your country. People talk about our channel, oh, you must hate the United States. I particularly didn't enjoy living in the United States. I don't necessarily enjoy that many aspects of the culture. There are some aspects that are good and that I try and incorporate in my life overseas, and I try and teach people who work for me and all that. But in many ways, it didn't work for me. It's okay to say to something, it's not a fit. That doesn't mean you hate it. In the same way that you end a relationship, end a friendship, you know, put boundaries in your life. Hey, I don't want to accept this, and I understand you're different, and like, that's cool. We'll go our separate ways. And for me, expatriating from the US was the ultimate example of, like, this isn't my problem anymore. It's not my place anymore, and they do them, and I do me. I happen to run a business that helps people leave the United States who feel less freedom. But in my own personal life, I spend my time focused on how to improve my life where I'm at now. And if you could get to that point, I think your life would probably be a lot better. And so the Fox News clip was, if you don't like the United States on July 4th, move to China. I saw another ad, we'll put it up here, or another meme, that there are flights to Sudan. If you don't like capitalism, move to Sudan. And so let's talk about this, because this is such a false dichotomy, right? I've chosen places to live that maybe not everyone wants to live. People think that maybe I'm not as successful as I am because I choose to live in more affordable places that I believe offer more personal freedom. I just have a sense that when I walk down the street, I am left alone. There's only one emerging country in the world that I really felt like there was kind of a police state vibe, and that was in Bangkok. And I can tell you it's gotten better over the subsequent times that I've gotten there. But when I spent my first month in Bangkok, I kind of felt that vibe. Like, you go places, they're kind of hassling you. That's gotten better. But I certainly had that vibe in the United States. I mean, you walk around a lot of places in the United States, you kind of feel that you're just not as free. It's what I call soft freedom. And so I've chosen places to live that maybe aren't as developed in some cases. I do have access to live in, I have a residence permit in Europe, have a residence permit in the UAE. I can spend, you know, plenty of time in places like Singapore if I want. You know, there are places that I have access to. I've chosen not to live there because I believe that, for example, Malaysia offers at a much lower price a little bit more personal freedom than, let's say, a Singapore, And I enjoy that, and I enjoy the country, and I enjoy the vibe, and it just works a lot better for me, right? Like, it's not all about living in the most developed place. Nice people, more personal freedom, a little bit more grit, more room to move around. That's why I chose Malaysia over Singapore, for example. And so you can choose to move wherever it is that you want. You don't have to follow my choices. You don't have to have a home in Bogota or go to Istanbul. But I would suggest if you open your mind to the fact that there is a lot more personal freedom in Istanbul than you would imagine, that there's a lot more safety in Bogota than you would imagine, and that there's a lot more development in Malaysia than you would imagine, you will find those things, and you don't have to do the thing of move to China or move to Sudan. Yeah, nobody's moving to Sudan. That's pretty clear. And it's a cute little thing to say to people who you just don't like and you don't want to engage with in an honest fashion. It is a false dichotomy. You can leave your country and not hate capitalism. And let's be honest, countries in the West stand for capitalism less and less right now. When I talk to people from older generations, what do they say? They say the younger generation wants to bring in socialism. Sometimes they get a little bit, hyperbolic and say they want to bring in communism. But yeah, no doubt, people like Bernie Sanders and other more socialist politicians in the West are gaining traction. That's why things like citizenship-based taxation are gaining traction as ideas in countries like Canada, where politicians are saying everyone should just pay, and pay some more. There should be no opportunities to escape the long hand of our country. And so that doesn't sound very capitalistic to me. And so you can still love capitalism and say, you know what, I think there's more capitalism over here. I mean, the United States, in terms of economic freedom, barely is in the top 24. Not a terrible showing out of 190 some countries, but not exactly the number one. And so for me, I want to go to where it's number one. But let's talk about personal freedom. Where do you find freedom in an unfree world? Because I'm getting calls from people on a number of different issues right now. Let's just take the United States, where I'm from. Number one, you have the recent Roe v. Wade issue. You have people who are upset with that. They feel like a basic liberty is being taken away. And so if you go to Europe, some of the countries aren't nearly as flexible. But you have, Georgia, Romania, Serbia, Greece, pretty much every country in the European Union as well, where you have that privilege. Now, if you don't agree with that, and you're like, hey, that shouldn't be a privilege, it shouldn't be a right, then I guess you're feeling, pretty comfortable right now in the United States, that's changed and it's going back to the States. But if you feel like, hey, that's not what I'm looking for, obviously there are other places that represent your values. By the way, had someone, and I don't take sides on this political stuff because, again, not my country anymore. I go to places that reflect my values and where I feel comfortable, and I'm not going to fight for the political issues or even really spend my time thinking of what I think about political issues in the U.S. But that's a thing where even we had someone who was when they're 55 years old and they're like, this is not going to personally affect me, but I just don't like the vibe. So on one side, that's a personal freedom issue, and you can agree with that or not. On the other side, there's people saying, I don't believe that we're going to have gun freedom. They want to take our guns. They want to restrict gun ownership in the United States. And so they're saying, obviously the U.S. is one of the most flexible countries for gun ownership, but what if you didn't have the same gun ownership rules? Would it be worth paying the incredibly high taxes? Would it be worth dealing with all the other restrictions on your freedom to live there and have guns? There are other countries where you can have guns, by the way. In Latin America, in parts of Eastern Europe, you can have guns. And so there are people who feel like that's being taken away. And so my point is that nothing and no country is guaranteed to last forever. The reason it's called Nomad Capitalist is not because you should be constantly moving around the world, as I do, which is a personal lifestyle decision. You're welcome to move to one country and to stay there for the next 25 years or 250 years if you want for your family and build a multi-generational legacy and make that your new place. But I do believe that nothing is guaranteed forever. Empires collapse. History shows us that. The United States is at that point where it's kind of at the marker where a lot of empires start to collapse. And so if people who say, oh, well, you can always keep running, you're never going to be able to stop running. Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, places change, cultures change, countries change, governments change. And it's not just a matter of Joe Biden get elected or Trump get elected, and I don't like that. It's a matter of the entire culture of what we want in our politicians changes. The United States is obviously a country that's very bitterly divided right now. And so do I want to be involved in that? No, I don't. And I think a lot of other people don't as well. And that's starting to affect people's freedoms on both sides. And so I would rather run, quote unquote, every 50 years, understanding that, I'm going to be in a better place, and that every generation or two is going to have to make a change to go somewhere where the capitalism and the freedom and the other values they have are still alive. The United States is still ranked number 15th on personal freedom. That is surpassed by countries like Estonia, Ireland, UK, and others. And so, I mean, not necessarily places in Europe where you imagine like, hey, this is the most free place in the world, but yet they beat the United States in a statistical level from, in this case, the Cato Institute. So if you're going to say that you stand for freedom, why not have the most freedom? Because in a country of tens or hundreds of millions of people, your vote and the vote of a couple people like you is not really going to move the needle. It's culture that moves the needle, and the culture in the Western world has for most of my lifetime been moving towards, you didn't build that, against entrepreneurship, against investors, more for everyone should pay, more for everything's free, everything's a human right. And some of those things we could argue, hey, it is a human right. We could argue, hey, why doesn't the US have this? Why doesn't the US have that? But the idea that like countries in the Western world want to literally take your home because you have two homes, yeah, that should be concerning to you. So why don't you go to and at least invest in and potentially live in a place where they're like, hey, if you want to have two homes, that's what happens when you become successful. And we want successful people. Like, why do you want to stay in a country where people who are successful aren't welcomed? Why do you want to stay in a country where the kind of freedoms that you value aren't welcomed? I don't think that you're going to change it at the ballot box. The easiest way to vote is with your feet and taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. And if your family had to move every 50 years, they're not moving to Sudan, they're not moving to China, they're not moving to Somalia. Those are all very nice false dichotomies that people trot out because they don't want to have the intellectual conversation about how their country isn't ranked number one. They don't even want to think about it. They just want to be the emotional partner in a relationship who just reacts only with emotion, never with facts, never with logic, never with reason. Is that the kind of relationship that you want to be in, surrounded by people who believe through no logical reason that you're bad because you've made money? Not for me. And so I would rather quote unquote run or cut and run or whatever else people say every 50 years, knowing that that's going to mean more freedom for myself and my family and the ability to create generational wealth to give back to the causes that we think are important and to help with the freedoms that we believe in. I think it's a lot better. So let's stop with the false dichotomy. And for you, let's evaluate what it is that you don't like about your country and what the boundaries are. If this happens, I'm out. And then you build infrastructure around that to say, okay, I'm going to have a residence permit to where I know I can move to Mexico as a first step. Or I'm going to start my company in the UAE and it's going to offer asset protection. Even though I'm going to pay tax in my country, I get asset protection. And then when I move, I get a residence permit in the UAE and I can lower my taxes then. Or I'm going to have citizenship in this European country because I believe in their values, and I'm going to go through my family tree and find a way to get that, or I'm going to go through the Malta citizenship program, or I'm going to get a golden visa and work towards citizenship. We've got episodes on all these things, but like, what's the infrastructure you want to have a residence permit, to have a citizenship, to have a home, and to have finances in another country or countries to where when your boundaries are violated and you say, I no longer feel free in my country, I feel unsafe, I feel there's too much of a surveillance state or a police state, or I feel like the things that are valuable to me are being taken away, I can move and I can replicate that somewhere else. Whatever that is to you, freedom is what it means to you, and I promise you to have 252 countries and sovereign territories. There's probably a place that represents your values better than where you happen to be born.